Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And when it comes to news for EVE Online, apparently on CC people have discovered that the new ships we're getting are not Navy destroyers, but they will be Navy battle cruisers and Navy exploration ships, which I think does make sense if we remember what is being mentioned during FanFest, is that they will also give faction warfare players like hacking objectives and things like that around propaganda towers in order to basically prepare the battlefield and try to take it, get an advantage. So exploration frigates make sense, and then battle cruisers rather than destroyers. Well, the reason everyone immediately jumped on the destroyer bandwagon is because this was actually mentioned not during the last FanFest, but somewhere before that it was something that CCP was looking into working for. Maybe it was like an art piece or something like that that was accidentally shown, and so everyone is expecting those ships to come in the pipeline, but apparently not for this expansion. Well, that's still pretty cool and good news. Kind of wonder if my Comanche purchases may have been a little bit of a mistake then, but we will see, of course, as we don't have all the information on those ships just yet. Next up, we'll take a quick look at the New Eden store as well, see what's happening over here. I did get an email with 50% off for Omega Time. I don't think it'll be in the services here, but basically through the website you can get a pretty steep discount at the moment. I guess that CCP wants to see the summer slump end. And for skins or things like that, yeah, no sales to see. You have the regular stuff that you can grab from the New Eden store. Alright, then we can make our way to the market. Here are the pilot services that's coming in at 210. There we go, and well, quite a bit of complaining again on the subreddit around plex prices, so let's jump in. It's not without reason. You can see here in Jita well above 4.7 million again. After last week's little drop, we are back to basically the one-year high point. I think this is the highest price of the year in Jita itself. Now let's take a look and see what's happening around Jita. So the Tranquility Trading Tower does still have a little bit of reserves at a slightly better price, going as low as 4.68 million. That may have been like a sell mistake. And then for the buyers, 4469. Nope, in Jita the most expensive buyers showing up here just shy of 4.5 million for a single plex. So still very expensive, and you can see right here that last week we took a little bit of a correction, but we are right back on the uptrend. I'll be honest, not what I expected to see. I thought that we would maybe flatten out here or slowly keep going down a little bit in plex prices. But if you look at basically the daily averages for the last 7 days, we are right back on the up, and we might just be heading for structural prices above 4.5 million if this keeps up, of course. We will see what the sale will mean for plex here, but potentially if it's really only subscription time that you're buying at 50% discount, it might not mean a lot. For the skill extractors, then we of course, oh no, first we usually check the multiple pilot train certificate. That had a little bit more of a substantial drop as we touched 2 billion. Does feel a little bit like the market gave up. It's got some extra volumes coming in on the downside, and we went down to a little bit above 1.5, probably 1.7-ish billion, maybe even 1.6 at some of the lowest price points. But you can also see this took only a couple of days to get to that lowest price point, and then the trend back up towards 1.75 billion has been started right away. We're already above that now, almost 1.8 billion again for the sellers and 1.65 billion for the buyers. So these are once again very expensive. And then for the skill extractors, you've got an even more shy little dip in the price with an immediate recovery. The one thing that I would say is maybe slightly good news is that at least in the last 3 days here for the daily average, we're basically flat. So we just recovered from the dip, and then we are flat on that high plateau of the moment, which is 530 million for a skill extractor for the sellers and 502, so above 500 million for the buyers as well. So with that price pressure back on, let's see what the injectors are doing. Here are the large scale injectors on the chart that just last week basically made another 1-year high point close to 900 million. Again, does feel like it's a little bit much for the market, but still the general trend for, let's say, the last month or so up and away from 800 million is still alive and well. That 20-day moving average is still going up. 5-day moving average closing on it today, but that could still change in the course of the day, of course. And so at the moment, our large scale injectors are selling for 855 million for the first one, 860 towards 870 for most, and 824 for the buyers. So these are also extremely expensive. And then the small scale injectors also showing that the general trend is still upwards pressure, but we're also hesitating right here after reaching 181s, and twice we do have that little bit of a pullback where the market says no, we're not gonna structurally sell small scale injectors for over 180 million. There's definitely people that say, I got a couple lying around here, let's put them on the market. That's really a great price. And so we're at 175 million for the sellers, 165 for the buyers, just 10 million in margin here. That does show that demand is actually pretty strong even at these high prices, but slight hesitation. And on the other hand, when we look at plex, the pullback was recovered from very quickly. We also have the daily alpha injectors to take a look at, also showing signs of a little bit of pressure, and 5-day moving average, the blue line, crossing the 20-day moving average, showing that potentially there is a trend break happening here. But let's remember, this is the exact same thing we saw last week in plex, so it's absolutely no guarantee that from here on out the daily alpha injectors will start to go down, and the minimum prices are actually not moving that much over the course of the last 2-3 weeks. It's just that once we reach 70 million ISK, then I think some sellers are finding that to be quite a decent sell price for some of their investments. A little bit more comes to the market, which dips the price, but will it keep dipping? I personally am starting to think no. And so we're at 69 million for the sellers, so a couple came in here as we went to 70, and you can see that here 69.5, and we're going down all in the last 24 hours, but it's at 62 million for the buyers. So there's definitely players out there that are willing to pay over 60 million for their daily alpha injectors. Again, compare this to what we see for most of the last year. 45-ish million, you usually would be able to grab an alpha injector for that. Once we reach 50, we got a sale right here that dipped the price back down to below 40, and it always was basically a big enough sale that we got enough daily alpha injectors across the market that it would take a decent amount of time for it to recover, to get back to that 45 million average, and then eventually break that 40. But the real change, of course, is that after this sale here in May, well, we are now basically in this new era where everything was like 30% more expensive or something like that, and as a result now this increase in price has not been challenged yet by CCP. Then we finally have the hypercores that are also showing first signs of a little bit of a trend break, but sort of the same story. We go above 500,000 ISK, some hypercores find their way into the market and bring the prices back down. Actually, for the last 2 weeks or so, we have been below the 20-day moving average. We can already tell, I think, here at the tail end that we're starting to change that trend. So what might have happened here, hypercore is a pretty cheap item, is that all of a sudden enough hypercores came in to keep things in check for a couple of weeks, but that this may eventually run out. So we're at 481,000 for the sellers. Look at that, 499 coming into view already on the front page. For 62,000 for the buyers. They are like slightly more careful, but it's still a pretty narrow margin. So for the pilot services, we're basically catching a little bit of a breather whenever I think a psychological number like 500,000 for the hypercores is reached, and that brings in a little bit of supply from some investors, gives us a little bit of breathing room, but the general trend is still very much on the upside. Next up, we've got the minerals coming in at 950. like that. And as always, we will start with titanium, and very interesting, not something that I was expecting. You would think this chart here is very stable, with a little bit of pressure in the second half, bringing us down towards that 3.8 ISK that we've been basically hovering above and below for most of the last couple of months. But you can see here, big volumes came in all of a sudden and an uptick in price, and at least this was when I was making the ticker. We were up to above 4 ISK for the sellers. Look at that, 434 for the sellers. Buyers at 372. They're still not really willing to break above like 380 or closer to 4 ISK, so they're a little bit careful here. But this does feel like a pretty big buyer came in all of a sudden and shifted the market for the sellers, basically grabbed everything up to a certain price point, pushing those sellers at 434. So the question is, does that player know something we don't? Stuff definitely dropped on CC. Maybe with the battle cruisers, that they're expecting lots of minerals or something like that. It is a possibility, although battle cruisers I don't think should shift the market that drastically, but maybe something long term that has been spotted there. Or is this more of a really big investor that took the gamble, but that this gap basically will be plugged very quickly, and that will be back below 4 ISK for the seller soon? That's another possibility, of course, but definitely a very ballsy move by whoever went in here and basically bought 16 billion units. Well, if you if we try to subtract the rest of this, 5, so probably around 10 billion units extra over a normal trading day for titanium. It is substantial. Next here we've got the pyrite market that also had a little bit of a jump that started last week already. Is staying above 10 ISK for the week. Sellers at 1060, buyers, first one coming in at 10 as well, showing that there is demand for minerals. I think lower activity might have started to seep through the mining activities as well, although let's take a quick look at the volumes as well for titanium. 70 million, 200 here, and then for pyrite we still have, I think, pretty healthy numbers when it comes to the supplies. This is only 3 days old with a 170 million units, so I don't think it's a supply problem. I think it's more demand coming in from somewhere. Could be speculation, could be nullsec, could be someone found something. Then we've got Mexalon that has a very annoying chart because that max price goes to crazy high levels. What the hell, CCP, the daily max of the running day are definitely a bit of a problem, but very nice upswing as well. In fact, 1 year high point for Mexalon. Look at the volumes as well over the last week. Very sharp increase and sustained high trading volumes on a couple of days. So is this also investing that's happening, or some panic buying because of something that might be happening? Who knows? For high-sec miners, it's very good news. Almost 88 ISK for the sellers of Mexalon. Best price of the year. If you happen to have some lying around, could be pretty damn good. And 80 for the buyers. I would say very good news for those miners, especially those like myself. Although I haven't been mining a lot, but my tip was always that, yeah, it did start to feel like maybe you could consider like a 50-50 approach, right? If you need ISK, of course, sell what you're mining, but you could maybe try to hold off a little bit for the high-sec miners, and this could be the week where that will pay off, because Mexalon, Zydrine, and titanium, Mexalon, pyrite and titanium are all up in price, and in fact Mexalon at a 1 year high point all of a sudden. Does this show true on the oxygen market? Well, a little bit. We're not seeing any spiky volumes all of a sudden rushing on grabbing some extra oxygen, but we're definitely heading back towards that 400 ISK on the average price. 399 for the sellers, 377 for the buyers, 125 million units on a 30-day sell time. That happened like just around a day ago. Feels like maybe someone became a little bit impatient and wanted to lock in a price of 400 ISK, but once we get through that, we We still have 30 million units at 400 waiting, and then there's not that much resistance to slowly edges up well above 400 disk, batches of 10 million, 20 million here and there, but most of the others feel like pretty regular volumes. So this feels like potentially a shift if the HiSig event starts to seep through to the others as well. Could be very bad news if you're looking for cheaper null-sig prices, but if you're looking for more expensive low-sig minerals, this could be the start of that. Then we've got Noxium, same story right here, in fact on some volumes as well, highest trading volumes in the month as we reach the bottom, so that could definitely be investors at 715, and they push the price back at almost 800 disk all of a sudden. All right, 780, so the chart still has to catch up. Basically here you could see that those buyers push the price back above 750, but sellers are now coming in at 780. Another sign, I think, that upwards pressure for Isogen could be on the books if we can get through this 155 million units here that keep us in check for 400 disk. We could be up for another serious change in the Isogen landscape. It would be very cool because we've basically been stuck here at the 400 disk mark for the last 3 to 4 months. Then for nullsig, we've got our Zydrine chart that was also losing a little bit of ground last week, but look at that, going back up to 2000 disk pretty easily and sharply. 2069 for the first seller, 2090, so going up to 2300 on the front page. That definitely, in my opinion, starts to show a little bit of a lack of availability. This is also all the browsing we can do, and here are all the buyers that basically hope that they can catch a little bit of Isogen, forced up to almost 1900 disk as well for Zydrine. And then we've got Megasite that's, well, also basically not giving in to the pressure is my read on that. Volumes are not that great, but still the price is high at 1600 for the sellers, 1555 for the buyers, so another very narrow margin right here in the Megasite market. Definitely start to feel like something is rumbling and that this is a little bit of a shift for the mineral market, and I would say HiSig miners, so you get a pretty good week at the moment, especially if you've got your minerals ready on the market. You can definitely sell at a pretty amazing price. We finally still have the Morphite for Tech 2, still pushing back up from that 40,000 disk, not willing to go below that. 42.5, 43,000 in fact for most sellers, and above 40,000 for the buyers as well. Not extremely expensive, but clearly decently high as well on comparing it to the last five or 6 months or so. So minerals up. Where does that demand come from? I'm not sure, but could be a little bit of hype centered around the expansion or some null-stick action, of course. Next up, we've got the PI market, 1805. There we go. As always, we'll take a look at these as well. So a very strong summer and, well, not what I expected, although if the demand for resources is going up, and it could also be larger ships. Well, faction warfare is also in low sec, so maybe there is capital related content or opportunities that are being spotted there that would explain something like this, despite a pretty strong summer and us ending last week at above 1.5 million, which was considered to be pretty damn nice. Look at that, over the last week we jump up to almost 1.75 million. We're at above 1.7 for the sellers and above 1.6 for the buyers as well, which to me is another indication that this is a demand driven jump here, and the volumes are down on all of that action, but yeah, prices are pretty damn high, while supply, it's not that great. Let's be honest though, it's not that great in supply, so I'm starting to hesitate to really call it a demand driven increase in price. Let's take a look at the rest before we try to conclude on that. Here are the construction blocks. Did lose a little bit of ground after peaking to 12,500 in August, but holding quite strongly at 10,000 disk. 10 for the sellers, 9.8 for the buyers. I mean, that has to be a sign of strong demand if buyers that normally at 10,000 you would expect 9,000 for the buyers to be a normal margin. So this to me is a sign that we do have strong demand in the PI markets, and then coolants sort of confirming that by going to a 1-year high point at 13,000 disk in the last couple of days for the average trading price. We're talking 13,300 almost for the sellers, 11,170 for the buyers. Obviously they're not just gonna push straight to 13,000 or 12,900 or something like that for those buyers, because it is a 1-year high point. There is probably some supply out there that's going to bring this down. But the fact that it is possible to bring the price up to that range must mean that everything up here has been bought out in the last week, which is pretty surprising and damn amazing. I did not expect that. I felt like we had a very strong summer, and here with some peaks in August, and we just blow through that all of a sudden this week. Quite amazing. Sort of maybe mirrors some of the real life situation where energy prices just keep going higher and higher as well. So enriched uranium is next. Let's take a look at that one. Still healthily above the 10k, although coming back down a little bit on the min-max prices, so a little bit of room opening up here. Almost 11,000 for the sellers, and this is a little bit more basically normal, 9.6 for the buyers. You open up margin of around 1,000 disk around these prices. I think that's not abnormal. Must be said that it's both demand that's not super high and supply that's not super high here as well. So it could just become a pretty tight market if that keeps up. Then we get our integrity response drones, really again flat, but at what range? Above 2.5 million, so that's still very, very strong. 2.8 million for the sellers, 2.7 million for the buyers, so still quite comfortably in the very expensive range. Now we've got the mechanical parts that are actually building back up as well. So the August peak is still alive and well, but we're pushing straight back above 10k. 11,400 now for the sellers and 10,000 for the buyers. So it's probably 11,400, already matching the high range for last week when it comes to those sellers. Miniature electronics next, still also 12.5, 13,150 in fact for the sellers, 12.5 now for the buyers. Buyers are stuck here, sellers going up a little bit, so another pretty close to a 1-year high point. Then we've got our nano factories. These are dropping off all of a sudden. Interesting. So we were trying to get to 1 million. We're down to 800,000 and below for the sellers, 720 for the buyers. Well, a big market like PI doesn't move in a single direction, of course. So a trend break on the nano factories. Then we've got our organic motor applicators back above 800,000, basically highest range for the year as well, 815 to 724. So here demand not really willing to pick up on those advanced PI materials that are basically still stuck below 1 million. I think it means that their usage is still not that great. I do think that this means that they are potentially a useful leverage if CCP wants to do something about bigger ships. Again, this could be somewhere where they could intervene as well, but I don't think they want to make stuff even more expensive, to be honest, at least not in the capital ship market. Recursive computing modules pretty much flat as well there, 924 to 763. And then we come to our robotics that are basically coming back down a little bit as well, coming from, well, still 73,000 above that for the sellers and 68,000 for the buyers. It's still a pretty narrow margin between sellers and buyers, and compared to the 1-year chart, it's still a pretty good price. Basically, we've got a double top that's forming here though, where we touched 80k on the sell prices on a couple of occasions. That does bring the market back down, but then the question is this double top meant to bring us down to lower prices, or is the general trend here that we will eventually run out again and start to move back up? It's gonna be interesting. Rocket fuels definitely trending back up on those max prices. So are we above 12,000 disk? Yeah, easily 12.5 to 12.7 for the sellers, 11,300 for the buyers. So another good week for rocket fuel. Self-harmonizing power cores still very, very strong, comfortably above 2 million disk. I would say even building in the last month or so, slowly, but the price is still trending up. 2.2 million for the sellers and basically 2 million for the buyers. Smart fab units breaking out all of a sudden, even some of these low volume items almost matching a 1-year high point. I went to 90k here. We're at 80,000 disc on a lack of availability, 65 for the buyers, so they know to be patient. This is low volume enough that this gap will normally be plugged and they will get their cheaper smart fab units eventually, but yeah, definitely a nice uptick for the sellers. Sterile conduits had a very strong start of September, getting back above 1 million, losing ground on that. We're still at almost 1.1 for the sellers, but buyers dropping off to 925. And then we've got the supercomputers, still very strong as well, I would say. 83,000 almost for the sellers, 76 for the buyers. Synthetic oil next, 8k. 9k now for the sellers, so it's not a great chart if you compare all of those other refined PI materials that easily go to 10,000 disc, and now even have breakouts at 13,000 disc for coolants, which is so easy to make. It's kind of crazy, but the usage and being tied to fuels must be a big advantage there. So this chart is not that great, but it's still holding on quite well to those 8,000 disc, and it's not like it's 1-year low point or anything like that. So the trend, I would say, is still that there is strong demand in our PI materials. Even synthetic synapses here, very good volumes a couple of days ago, and staying pretty damn high on the average price, 95,000 to 90,000, showing again that strong demand. Transcranial microcontrollers moved above 100,000 discs, so this one, a specialized PI material at 100, is to me a historical normal price reference. That's what I was used to making when I was producing robotics myself. So 103 to 96,000, again, that's a narrow margin for something that just went up to a 100,000 disc range. So buyers have basically been forced up, showing that there is pretty strong demand here. We all know that water-cooled CPU is sort of the problem child of PI here at the moment, still stuck below 5,000 ISK, 4.6 for the sellers, 4.3 for the buyers. So this is basically not needed enough in the economy to do something about this price range. And then the wetware mainframes actually touching 175 again over the last week, almost there for the sellers, and 1.5 million for the buyers. Bit more margin here, so it's like not like that one's gonna break out to 2 or 2.5 million or anything like that, but it's definitely also trading at the high end of the range. So I keep being surprised by the PI market with very, very strong prices, which is of course very good news for us that are still sticking around and that are making PI, that have PI reserves, and that can take advantage of these great prices. As always, I would say, basically try to dollar cost average, take advantage of these great prices, but also try to maybe keep a little bit of powder dry as well. Who knows what happens next week? If all of this is starting to be speculation on something changing again through a CCP intervention, and I think this could be a real sign that that happens. Someone doesn't just all of a sudden, or the market doesn't just all of a sudden decide to triple volumes on one of the most ubiquitous materials in EVE Online. There's, in my opinion, has to be a little bit more behind that, and if it is more demand for resources, which at the moment is what it's looking like, then PI could also take advantage of that, because obviously PI has already been pretty high in price. And then we've got our advanced moon materials next. Let's see if there's a sign of a bottom forming there. Coming in at 28.35. So for advanced moon mats, I thought maybe like August would turn out to be a little bit of a bottom, but the market proved me wrong last week. Let's see where the trend is at this week. So first of all, crystalline carbonite for Galente. At least the max prices are trying to get back above 100 ISK, but the average price still not there, 103 to 96. Basically, you're still easily buying crystalline carbonates below 100, which is not a great price. Excuse me. Then we've got our Caldari with titanium carbide. That's also flat for the week, not really knowing which way to go, at 143 to 137. All right, let's see if that trend continues with ferrite carbide for Minmatar, actually dropping back below 100 on some volumes. 102 to 97. So average prices taking a little bit of a dip here. Some desperate suppliers willing to just dump to the buyers. And then finally for Amar, it's tungsten carbide. That's also basically staying above 100, but only just at 120 for the sellers, 101 for the buyers. To get a chart like this, again, some suppliers are just bringing the stuff to the market and selling straight to those buyers, happy to get any ISK out of it. So it's not like we're testing a new 1-year low point, but it's clearly not that we are shifting anything either. There's too much supply for the current demand, at least in the carbides. Let's take a look at the metamaterials next. For Galente, it's photonic metamaterials. Yeah, flat for the week, but at a 1-year low point. That's still not great. 7300 to 7200. For Caldari, it's non-linear metamaterials. Slight uptick, basically a little bit of spread coming in, but close to 1-year low range, so that's still not great. Almost 12,000 to 11.3. And then for Minmetar, plasmonic metamaterials, still below 12.5, a little bit of pressure in fact at the tail end here. So 11,900 for the first seller, 11,500 for the buyers. And then for Amar, it's terahertz metamaterials that are getting pretty damn close to another 1-year low point at 9,000 ISK for the sellers, 8.7 for the buyers. So still seeing a lot of pressure here. I think it's still oversupply, and let's see if this gets confirmed then by the others, as we've got fermionic condensates that basically hasn't moved for the week and is stuck on its lowest range for the year as well, 35k to 33k. So that's not great. Ferrogel did a 1-year low point about 2 weeks ago, slight little bump, and look at that, pressure is right back, so oversupplied. Fullerides not able to break above 500 ISK, so same story. Hypersynaptic fibers, 1-year low point last week, slight little bump, I think we're stopping already. Nanotransistors below 2.5, so we're back up slightly from that at 2.8 for the sellers, almost 2.6 for the buyers. On this 1-year chart, it's still not great. Then we've got our phenolic composites, again 1-year low point, slight bump, 20-day moving average trend still down. Then we've got our pressurized oxidizers stuck where it's at, reinforced carbon fibers. This, wow, back above 7,500 ISK might look like a pretty serious change. Let's see where those sellers are at. It's just we're running out for some reason of the reinforced carbon fibers. Well, for some reason, when you're selling them below 7,500 ISK, when you got 12.5 to 15,000 about a year ago, it's not that easy to see why sellers are not too motivated to bring this stuff to the market. But my suspicion is going to be that here we touch 9,000 ISK, and all of a sudden they're gonna see this as a golden opportunity and will crush this price right back down on supplies pretty quickly. And then finally we get our ceramic fibers that also does a little bit more volatility. Right, first sign here where in August, early August, we could sell for 300, then we can pick them up at 200 ISK about a month later, and now we're a couple weeks in and we are once again selling at 293, so almost 300 ISK. That's definitely tradable volatility. We have to be honest when that happens as well, but my suspicion is that again, as we get closer to 300 ISK, supplies will be coming in and will move right back down. And can we see enough volatility across the board in advanced movements to say or to decide that we're going to actively trade this for short-term trades like this? I personally don't see that happening, so I'm still waiting for a clear sign that maybe a bottom is forming, but here it is unfortunately not the case, so that should not be great news for our Tech 2 ships. If you're looking for higher prices there, 32.50, 350, like that. Well, let's go through the lists, and these are of course also 1-year charts that will be quite depressing for those that are looking for value. Here's the Basilisk, 200 million at the start of the year, and now basically bouncing from a 1-year low point at 100 million, so a slight investment opportunity spotted by the market. Obviously a logistics route for 100 million was kind of crazy. Back up to 119 for the sellers, 105 for the buyers, but you can also see that it tends to be decently slow, and we're definitely not all of a sudden going to break out to 150, at least not at the moment. And so to call these tradable waves, in my opinion, they are not. Then we get the Cerberus, right? Even smaller little wave as we went below 130. We are back to 132 for the sellers, just above there, and then 125 for the buyers. It's still super cheap on oversupply. Then we get the curse that's coming back down to the 130. So this one, basically, when it goes below 130, you can see here the buyers do come in, of course. Volumes pick up, but they're here not so careful, pushing price back up to 150. Here already more careful, and now we got a little bit of a bump that was very short-lived, just 2 days of a 150 million, and now the supply is coming back in, and we're seeing our buyers below 130 again, yeah, at 119 already, 119.7. So basically the pressure is back on for the curse, and at 25 day it's not a great one to twitch trade either, but look for those buy opportunities. Basically right now you can test that 120 million. You can see how the daily average prices are coming down and are basically on the right side of that 5-day moving average. If you're going to get an aggressive buy order, it's definitely in this type of chart. Then we've got the damnation, slow pressure as well. Not really seeing any moves on basically the information that is going to be Navy battle cruisers for these. I think they're unique enough that the command ships are not going to suffer from it, at least not from a PvP standpoint. From a PvE standpoint, maybe they have competition, but again, we need all the details here. Next we've got the Deacon, so logistics frigate, the small ones do have tradable bumps here from below 20, well below 20 to 30 million, very quickly dropping back off, and we're back in basically buy territory at the moment. 17 million for the sellers, below 16 million for the first buyer, and so you're basically, yeah, close to a 1 year low point, very low range, and you're able to trigger a buy order in this type of market. So if you're looking, if there is someone that really wants that trade high from the Tech 2 market, this one looks like something that you should be buying. Then the Deacon, it's a small ship, it's shown its volatility just over the last couple of weeks, and it's right there where you want to set up a buy order. Then we've got the Eagle, right? Another command ships, or no, heavy assault cruiser, below 130, slowly edging its way back up. That there, 131 to 118, showing again, look at those volumes. Those buyers are just non-existent. Then we get the EOS flat below 250, not much to say there. Ares close to 1 year low point again, touching 30 million. I mean, we can go through the list here. The Flycatcher, slight uptick, actually decent uptick, almost to 45 million or something like that. Sellers coming in at 46.5, buyers are at 35 million. So grabbing a buy order now, that's the wrong side of the chart. Here you're not going to trigger a buy order all that easily. But the story is not crazy, since we reached a 1 year low point about 10 days ago that basically triggered a little bit of volumes. But it's an interdictor, it's a destroyer. Maybe there's slight trades to be had in these ships as well. I personally would focus on the frigates. Then the Guardian, 1 year low point on the right side as well. So if you're really looking for that investment, 102 to 96, you're super easily grabbing a Guardian below 100 million ISK, and you know that the Basilisk does tend to bump from that. So the traders are probably seeing this as a very pronounced opportunity to jump in. If you grab it right now, then you've got a good chance. Otherwise, I think it won't last very long, but it's right now in the perfect state to buy the cheapest Guardian of the year so far. I always have to say so far there. Heretic, yeah, in between spot, able to easily absorb an 80 a day volume, so also 2-3 times the normal volume, and the price doesn't move from that, showing that if there's enough buffer there, you can create a very stable market. Then we've got the Hound. Yeah, unfortunately, right, sometimes those bumps are also quite shallow. So we went to 15 million, a little bit of a bump here, but to 17 million, that's not exactly tradable, and we're already heading back down as it starts to rain again. I hope the sun doesn't come through too much. Here's the Ikitursa, slight climb back to 500 million on volumes again, so 1 year low points do attract some buyers. The Ishtar, yeah, wavy pattern above 130, we're back below that, so you're probably 120 for the buyers, 125 for the sellers. Cheapest Ishtar on the market yet again, so another buy opportunity there, but you can also see from this wave here, you're not gonna trade, you're not gonna sell in a couple of weeks either at a decent profit. Kirin heading back down, but I think buyers and sellers are meeting 14 to 14 million. Yep, exactly. So you need a little bit more patience. You can see on these volumes that potentially it can happen. The bottom can drop out of the Kirin again because there's like a couple hundred waiting just above 14 million. Buyers are coming in at 14 million, but all of this could then get filled in. And then look at that, we're coming in at 13, 12.8, 12.6, 12 million for 60 ships or so. So it's interesting, very difficult, but for the Kirin, I would honestly wait to see how that plays out. If we can chew through these buy orders and then maybe make our way to below 13 million, you get maybe a jumping point. Then we've got the Manticore. Yeah, very shallow uptick here again, so the trading might be in a rough spot as well. Nemesis slowly heading down, but not at a 1 year low point yet. Nighthawk bump up to 300 million and already coming back down. Honestly, unless there's something really drastic to show, again here, look at those high volumes. So here you get a trade 15 to 25 million. That's nice. Back down to 15. Looks good, but you can see how those higher points keep coming back down. So it's harder and harder to actively trade in Take 2. Rook proving us wrong all of a sudden. That's substantial. Normal volumes 12 a day, 40 in a single day, 4 times the normal volume does bring the price up substantially, and this from, well, a price well below 150, let's call it 140, selling at 170. That's still 125 for the buyers though. They're just not budging at all. Slight supply shock here that again is going to be absorbed pretty quickly. Next up here, the Saber, 1 year low point just about a week ago. You can see the volumes for the traders, but at least not 4 times the normal volumes or anything like that. And so the uptick is quite shallow as well. Scalpel flat at the low point. Are we buying below 10? I don't think so, but close to it. So this another, now it's not the chart so much, but the supply compared to the demand, that if you want in, yeah, Scalpel logistics frigate, buy a couple of these at 10 million, and your potential to hit 20 does exist. But keep in mind, we have seen in the last couple of small ships here that for the last month or so it hasn't really materialized. Then we still have the Scimitar bumping off of 100 million, so basically going to do what we expect the Guardian to do next week. On that one, well, yeah, 100 million and below for a logistics cruiser, natural that some people come in to buy that. Then we've got the Sleipnir dropping off 254 to 220. No, that's a little bit of a strange data point, probably a sale in another station in Jeddah itself. Vagabond very much stuck below 150, and then the Zarmast pronounced 1 year low point touching 350 million. 359 for the sellers, 353 for the buyers, for a Triglavian logistics cruiser that started here at 500 million and had a peak at 700 million ISK. Definitely uniquely low for a Triglavian Tech 2 ship right here. So yeah, the Tech 2 ship market, again, I'm still in the same philosophy. I'm buying what I'm planning to potentially use. Got a couple of investment, but nothing too crazy. And if I do jump in, I do look for those 1 year low points, like right here, with the daily averages still on the left side of the 5-day moving average, so that your buy orders have a decent chance to trigger. Next up, the Tech 3 ship market at, let's say, 44 minutes. Like that, and as always, we'll start with the destroyers. How to interpret this then? Because we thought maybe Navy faction destroyers would come into play, might come in a little bit into the usage case for these tactical destroyers as well, but now it's battlecruiser and an exploration frigate, so I think they're basically safe, and outside of the construction cost impact, I don't see anything. And let's be honest, battle cruisers not exactly like the biggest things either, and I think not used that often. I don't see that many. Well, there's the Ferox as a battle cruiser fleet, but I think generally, especially still also with the Tech 2 prices as they are, there will be other options. So I don't think it's going to be that crazy of a rush, and it's not going to absorb that much of, let's say, gas that might be needed in the confessor or anything like that. So for here, the confessor, you can see we're basically just below 50 million, flattening out quite nicely, shrugging off any of that news. 49 to 45 million for the confessor on, I think it's like more gas supply that's giving these a little bit more breathing room, but it's still very expensive, of course. 52 million to 48 million for the Hecate. And then we've got the Jackdaw, also a little bit of pressure coming below 50 million, 50 to 46 million. But I would ask the exact same question as what I've been doing over the last couple of months. Why would you bring in something like a Jackdaw at 50 million when you can bring in an Ishtar, let's say, at 130 million? I think the price proposition is still not great, and for the Zwepel, he's just not moving anywhere, which means 46 million to 42 million, and this for me is also a pretty strong sign that the moves in these prices, especially here in Confessor, Hecate and Jackdaw, is more tied to production costs than to like actual demand or supply increases or anything like that. It's just a tiny market all of a sudden, where it used to be super cool, enough volumes, and you actually had a little bit of interaction, interplay within the tactical destroyers themselves that made for some decently predictable trade opportunities. That's all gone, and it's just a tiny market now. Cruisers are doing a little bit better, so let's start here with the Legion. You can see here that we have had some trade opportunities and some decent volumes. On top of that, I've actually been training my character in some cruisers as well, Tengu and Legion, and I think the Loki is like a couple months out or so until I can fly that as well. So I've been interested in trying to buy some of these hulls as well. Under pressure at the moment, so the Legion, you can see that going below 180 on the average price, 177 to 161, but are still not below 160 though, so they're not really willing to get like a pronounced buy opportunity, but the Legion is clearly under pressure. Next here we have the Loki. That's very nice actually. Look at that average price also touching 180 million, sellers at 178, buyers below 170 at 168. I would say the Loki is pretty much at a 1 year low point, especially if you can buy. And look at that spread even on the between the daily average and the 5-day moving average. If there's ever an opportunity to grab a Loki hull below 170, it is basically right now. Proteus, same story. Look at that, especially the buyers dropping off below 150. Is that correct? No, some came in, I think. Yeah, look at that, 29 right here, but 181 to 151. So big spread between sellers and buyers. You could even maybe have a little bit more patience to see if some extra supply comes in and really pushes us down to a pronounced 1 year low point or close to that, matching something like this part of the chart. That's when you can have a go at buying the cheapest Proteus, but it could basically potentially happen on this chart. You may have seen that on the ticker as well, but the Tengu doing the same thing. Daily averages at the 1 year low point at the moment, 172 to 164. So if you basically want some Tech 3 hulls, or if you've been training for or planning to fly them, basically you get the cheapest prices almost across the board now for all strategic cruisers, which is, in my opinion, pretty cool. And we'll see if volatility happens or not, or if again there's a reason which might be CC again here, why all of a sudden we are seeing a uniform drop-off across all 4 of these strategic cruisers, because honestly the Loki, being by far the most popular one, has usually done stuff that's a little bit different from like the Proteus, and the Tengu as well has really been doing its own thing quite a lot of the times. So they weren't necessarily moving uniformly in the same direction like this. It could be that the Navy battle cruisers will have a little bit... Oh, and already, I think I saw a comment on that in a thread about those battle cruisers, that for combat probing, they could actually be competition for the strategic cruisers. So keep that in mind, is that the new ships could actually eat away at some of the use cases for these strategic cruisers as well, which would mean that these this price decline across the board is actually a normal response from the market and could be structural as well. So I don't want to, say that you're definitely gonna make money if you're buying a Tengu right now. I would say again, just like with the Tech 2, especially if you're planning to eventually fly one or you can use them, that then makes sense to buy them. Be careful for the big trades or anything like that. The markets are quite dangerous at the moment, I would say. Very insightful comment as well. Was it last week or the week before that on Tech 2 that we keep testing new lows because player activity is just that low in the game, and then there's too many Tech 2 ships out there. Everyone could be flying them and you'd still not get that many players in Tech 2 ships getting blown up. Part of that could be playing here in Tech 3 as well, and then so it's basically what I'm trying to say is that it's all a very complex situation, and it's not easy, and I'm definitely not trying to like predict or give advice to you guys on what to do exactly in these markets, because things are super unpredictable. If it is due to low activity, then the big sale and maybe the expansion could really turn things around on that. Potentially, admittedly, nobody knows, and then this could be a huge purchase actually. So it's very difficult to see exactly where any of this is going. But for me personally, it's definitely a cool thing to do on a weekly basis. We still have an extra product for the week, and basically a request on a comment as well for me to take a look at the subsystems. So let's do that, coming in at 51.45. Now that's a decent list and it's quite annoying to get there, so let's go to the ship modules and then the subsystems. And we'll just go through the list and take a look at the trends here. So for Amar core subsystems, the augmented antimatter reactor, they also have annoying names to pronounce as well. Basically recovering from a 1-year low point, and outside of a couple of jitters here and there, pretty stable market at around and below 30 million ISK. The solution sequencer, very stable market around 25 million, not much to say there. And the energy parasitic complex is also recovering basically from a period where it was at a 1-year low range of around 20 million for the buyers. So we are recovering slightly from the low points, but there's not much to say here. Then we'll go through the charts of the rest, but I'm honestly expecting something pretty similar. Covered reconfiguration, 25 million to 30 million. Augmented plating, 30 million, a bit above, bit below. And then the nanobot injectors, see if we can get that to show, landing on 25 million, basically still pretty cheap. All right, we'll go and take a look at the other charts, but that's the same. That's the same, range is 30. And then this is actually close to a 1-year low point on the support processors with not a lot of volumes. Probably not the most popular subsystem. Intercalated nanofibers back above 30 million, so again recovering a little bit from a dip in August. Interdiction nullifier, 20 million, pretty cheap. All right, nothing too special. And then the wake limiter, going back down a little bit from 30 million after again a dip in August that's recovered a little bit more quickly than most of the others. So Amar subsystems 25-30 million across the board, pretty stable. We'll take a look at the Caldari ones. A little bit of a bump here on this one, 38 million on the augmented graviton reactor on big volumes as well. So for some reason that one's a bit more popular. Electronic efficiency gate bumped up above 30 million in mid-August and is basically settling down. It's still doable though. Another bump here, look at that, obfuscation manifold above 40 million ISK as well. And then we get the covert reconfiguration, same story here, bump above 35. Yep, here as well, look at that, just about a week ago, bumped up to 50 million for the amplification node. And then the defensive, that's pretty stable below 30. All right, another bump right here, 35 million. Magnetic infusion basin, a little bit more stable, and same story here. So this one, accelerated ejection bay, that's probably a DPS thing. And then we've got Caldari propulsion subsystem. Ooh, that's a big bump as well. Even a daily average above 60 million on the chassis optimization. Fuel catalysts 25 million, interdiction nullifier 25 million. So a slightly different story in the Caldari subsystem. Clearly something happened there where a couple of Caldari Tengu builds all of a sudden in very high demand, probably fleet formation, things like that, a little bit of buying that had to happen by an alliance that pushed prices up in a quite a sharp manner, but also decently easily absorbed by the market. So about a week later you got decent prices again for most of these. Caldari subsystems though, a little bit less stable in the last couple of months and a little bit more expensive as well. For Galente, I'm honestly expecting decently stable things, although here augmented fusion reactor just right now making its way above 30 million ISK from a cheap period again in August. So then we've got electronic efficiency gate 25 and below, that's quite doable, and the friction extension processor still below 30. All right. Coverts slightly more expensive. Let's see if I can get 35 to show. Yeah, just below 35. Augmented plating still at 20, so that's doable. And then the nanobot injector at 30 million, but pretty stable as well. Couple of bumps here, but nothing too major. Then we've got the drone synthesis projector, clearly a little bit more popular at the moment as well. Bumping up to 37, 30 for the other one, and 25 probably for the last one. And then we get the hyperspatial optimizer below 30, interdiction nullification 25, and then the localized injectors at 30 million. So for Galente, my read on this one is that it has a little bit more differentiation, except for the propulsion subsystem. Those are pretty cheap across the board and in line with the Amar subsystems. All the others have like clearly a most popular one that does then tend to be influenced by the market and has higher prices from time to time. So it's not as bad as the Caldari that clearly has a little bit of volatility in it, but you're still paying slightly more than the very stable and uniform prices in the Amar subsystems. And finally we got Minmatar, which is actually, if I'm not mistaken, the most popular one, considered to be the most powerful one, because you get both shield and armor bonuses, but maybe that also means that production is high enough. Let's take a look. So here we get 25 million, normal price, pretty stable, but yeah, look at at this though. So the volatility in the first part of the year was quite great. The solution sequencer still below 30, so that's also quite doable and decently stable. And then immobility drivers 30 million, slightly more expensive as well on this one. On the defensive side, covert reconfiguration, give us something little, ooh, actually a bump above 50 million just this month, coming back down already. So below 30, Let's take a look at that. Sellers still at 33 million, but yeah, already a little bit more doable. And then we get adaptive 25, and we've got augmented coming back down below 30. Decently sharp, and look at that, 40, 45, 40, 40, 40 again, double top here, showing that, yeah, augmented durability does have a little bit more volatility in it as well. And then offensive, here are the launchers, 30 million, so slightly more expensive. Projectile scoping array, another spike, 40, even above 50 million on a day, back down below 30, so it doesn't last too long. And then support processor just below 30. Now we've got another spike up to 50 million. That still needs a little bit of time to be absorbed. It will do that eventually, but interesting. And then interdiction nullifier, not that popular. And then look at that here again, 62 million on a day, and now back down to the normal 30, 25, 30 million range. So for Minmatar, for the Loki, I would say also slightly more expensive and some more volatility, just like with the Caldari ones. That tends to take, like, let's say 10 days or so, and then new supplies have brought those prices back in line to what's normal. But also this one basically is a little bit of a mix of Caldari and Galente in my book, has clearly some more popular subsystems than the others, has some volatility on top of that as well, and so yeah, that's why it's the most popular of those strategic cruisers at the moment. So I would say when it comes to the subsystems, personally, my strategy would always be to be a little bit patient, right? If you are interested in the Loki, for instance, and you're right in the middle of one of these big bumps, right? Let's say that you're here and you're seeing 40 million for one. Look at the chart. I can buy below 30, have a little bit of patience. 2 weeks later, you're buying below 30, which is always like a normal price for most of these subsystems in general. And if you're looking for stability, then it's pretty obvious that the Markor subsystems are your go-to. The Legion is a little bit more stable than all of the others. And there we go. That's it for this EVE Talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching. And as always, I'll see you next time.